Hey guys, this is Will at Third and Long. Welcome to my Week 10 college football predictions for the 2023 college football season. We will be looking at who will win, who will lose, and what we predict the final scores will be. So hit that like button and subscribe. We have a lot of games this weekend, so let's go ahead and get started. And there's a lot of really good games this weekend too. So starting out the week on Saturday for Week 10 at 12 p.m. on CBS, we have number 3 Ohio State Buckeyes at 8-0 versus Rutgers at 6-2. Look at Rutgers, 6-2. That's a pretty good record right there for them. So Ohio State comes in at 18.5-point favorites. So Ohio State is coming off of their win versus Wisconsin. The last few weeks have been pretty close games for them. Kyle McCord has 2,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 3 picks. They have Marvin Harrison Jr., loaded wide receiver room, good running backs, a top 3 defense. The biggest issue is the quarterback position. McCord is really not doing enough to win games. He's not costing them the game, but he has some really great weapons, but he hasn't gotten better since the year started. Nonetheless, they have a top defense, and that's what's carrying them through games. Now, Rutgers actually has a pretty decent defense also, so the Buckeyes give up 260 yards per game. Rutgers gives up 276.9 yards per game. So a top 10 defense also, but their offense is not very good. And they are a run-heavy team, so they will be running right into that D-line for the Buckeyes, and they are going to shut that down. So I have the Buckeyes cruising to an easy win here, getting to 9-0. They will win 34-13, and they will cover that really large spread. Next game we have at 12 p.m. on Fox, number 25 Kansas State 6-2 versus number 7 Texas at 7-1. So Texas is 4-point favorites here. This is a game that has upset written all over it. Quinn Ewers is out. He should be out about 2 to 4 weeks so far. So Malik Murphy should be getting his second start here, which he had a pretty decent game his first start last weekend, but that's a big loss not having Quinn Ewers here because Kansas State is a pretty decent team. So they are averaging 464.6 yards per game, Texas 454 yards, but they have a pretty good defense also. So they're only giving up 343.8 yards. Texas is giving up 328 yards. So both teams have really good defenses. The main kicker here is Kansas State has a pretty good rush offense, but Texas has a pretty good rush defense. They do not have Quinn Ewers, so they will not be going vertical this game. They will be keeping the game on the ground with Brooks and trying to win the game with their defense and their special teams. So, like I said, this has upset written all over it. And Kansas State always plays Texas tough. Texas just has to get through this game. They just have to win out, get to the Big 12 championship, potentially play Oklahoma, beat them, and get into the playoffs. But this game, watch out here because Kansas State can win this game because Texas does not have Ewers, and that's a massive loss versus a really good team with a tough defense. But I'm going to go with Texas winning a close one here. They will win 27-20, and they will cover that spread, but watch out. I would not be surprised if they lose, but just hold on, Texas. Just win these last few games and get to the Big 12 championship. Our next matchup is at 12 p.m. on ESPN. We have the 5-3 Texas A&M Aggies versus 11 Ole Miss at 7-1. So Ole Miss comes in as 3-point favorites. There's a lot of really tough games this year, and there's a lot of potential upsets. So this game, Ole Miss, they have the better offensive roster. They have Jackson Dart, they have Quinton Junkins, they have Watkins. So they have the quarterback, they have the running back, they have the wide receiver. But Texas A&M has a really good defense. They are only giving up 269 yards per game. So they have the far better defense, and that will always keep the game competitive. That will always keep the game close here. Now, the Aggies are starting Max Johnson as their starting quarterback. He started like the last 4 to 5 weeks because their starter went down. But they don't have the playmakers that Ole Miss has. However, that defense, like I said, should keep the game competitive. They could easily win this game and just shut down the offense of the Ole Miss Rebels. But I'm going to go with Ole Miss winning a really close one here. 24-20, covering the spread. I could see that score flip-flop, though. I would not be surprised if they get upset here. Really tough games this week, and it's getting to the point of the season where teams start to get wore out and upsets start to happen. But I'm going to go with Ole Miss squeaking out a really close one. Next game, we have another good game at 12 p.m. on ABC. Number 12 Notre Dame at 7-2 versus Clemson at 4-4. Notre Dame is a 3-point favorite. So Notre Dame, they have another really good defense. Actually, both teams have really good defenses. So Notre Dame gives up 279 yards per game, and Clemson gives up 266 yards per game. Both tough defenses, but Clemson's having a down year this year. They just can't get the offensive right. And they have a lot of turnovers. They're one of the worst teams in the country with fumbles. Notre Dame plays very clean games. They play really good defense, and they run the ball well. That's basically their ID this year. They have Hartman there, 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks. They have Estime, who's closing in on 1,000 yards, so he'll probably clinch that this weekend. This is a tough game because Clemson has a pretty good rush defense. They get after the quarterback. Hartman has played Clemson before, so that they're not going to throw anything at him that he hasn't seen before. I will be going with Notre Dame to be getting their 8th win here, 28-20, and covering that spread as well. Next game we have is at 12 p.m. on the SEC Network. We have 1-7 Yukon versus number 19 Tennessee at 6-2. This is a massive spread. Tennessee is 36-point favorites. But let's be honest here, this game is not going to be close at all in any way whatsoever. Yukon stinks. They're 1-7. Tennessee has the way better roster. They have Milton, they have Wright, they have White. So they have the far better playmakers. Yukon has absolutely no playmakers. And they have a pretty bad defense too. So look for Tennessee to be able to get a lot of easy scores here. But that's a pretty big spread there. And I have Tennessee sailing to the easy win, winning 42-10, but they just barely won't cover that spread. But that game should not be close at all. Next game at 2 p.m. on the Pac-12 Network, we have 2-6 Arizona State versus number 18 Utah at 6-2. The Utes are 11-point favorites. So with the Utes, they have 2 wins. They are coming off of a win right now. Number 18 Utah, Kyle Whittingham. They're coming off of that loss last weekend versus Oregon. I did call that. I did say that was going to be a blowout. They just do not have a good offense at all. I think they were averaging like 280, 290 offensive yards per game. That's atrocious, but they are a very well-coached team. Very underrated head coach. The most underrated head coach in the country. They have a really good defense, and they have really good special teams. So they can rely on that for most games, but they won't be able to beat tough physical teams with good offenses. That is not the Sun Devils. So look for the Utes to get back on track here and to get another Pac-12 victory. I have them winning 31-17, so getting an easy win at home and covering that spread. They're just way too physical. They are going to beat up the Sun Devils. Next game at 2:30 p.m. on CBS, we have 2-6 Army versus number 17 Air Force at 8-0. So Air Force is 18.5-point favorites. They could conceivably run the table and go undefeated this year, but they're just not going to get in the playoffs because they have a pretty weak schedule. But looking at this game, Army, they're on a 5-game losing streak. They don't have a good offense. They don't have a good defense. With Air Force, they have a very efficient offense with the triple option. They run the clock. They run the ball. They can control the possession time of this game and just basically have the ball the whole game. They're only giving up 237 yards per game. So they should be able to control this game on both sides of the ball. Look for them to cruise to a win here and to win 27-13. They're just not going to cover that spread. That's a pretty big spread for teams that possess the ball for so much time and move so slow down the field. But they will still be getting the win. Next game we have is at 3:30 on CBS. We have number 14 Missouri at 7-1. What a year they're having. Versus number 1 Georgia at 8-0. Georgia's 15.5-point favorites. That's a pretty decent spread versus this in-conference, in-division matchup here. So Georgia is coming off of that beatdown versus the Florida Gators. They still don't have Brock Bowers. He will still not be back. Missouri, they have a really good offense so far this year. So they are lighting it up. Cook, Schrader, Burden. Lots of weapons there. They can definitely move the ball. I think they're getting 443 yards per game. But Georgia has a pretty decent offense also. So they're getting 506 yards per game. This is not the Georgia team of old, though, because the running game is not as good as it has been previous years. And their defense is top, 15, but it's not top 3 as of right now. They are giving up 272 yards per game. This is a game that's a potential upset because Missouri barely lost to Georgia last year. It was like 26-22 or something like that. So they can play them very close, very physical, but I have Georgia getting the win here, controlling the second half of the game. I would not even be surprised if they are down first half, but they're so physical, they will control the line of scrimmage second half. Look for Georgia to win 35-24 and for that spread not to be covered. Next game we have is at 3:30 on ESPN. We have number 4 Florida State at 8-0 versus Pittsburgh at 2-6. Florida State is 21.5-point favorite, so a pretty big spread there for a conference game. Florida State, their last couple games, they have been getting things back on track. They have been playing full, complete games because it got kind of iffy there after that Boston College game to where they kind of started to look like they were just coasting through the season. But it's time for them to step on the gas right now. Stop coasting. It's week 10. You need to be hot going into the conference championship and potentially the playoffs. So Florida State is 21.5-point favorites. They have the far better roster here. They have Travis, Benson, Coleman. They have a very good offense and they have a pretty decent defense. Pitt, they have a good, they have a pretty decent defense. They have a horrible offense. So look for Florida State to beat them up and get physical on both sides of the ball. Florida State will win this game 38-17. They will not cover that spread. Pitt beat Louisville, but they're not going to beat Florida State. Next game at 3:30 on Fox. Number 9 Penn State at 7-1 versus Maryland at 5-3. Penn State is 10.5-point favorites. So Penn State last weekend almost lost to Indiana. They had a really tough game. Hopefully that woke them up. So they had that really close loss versus the Buckeyes. Looks like they went into last week's game kind of down. But hopefully they got through that, got through their tough, close game. Every good team has one per year. They won, so they got through it. Hopefully they can get things back on track. But either way, they have a top 10 defense. So in those close, tough games, they can always rely on their defense to show up. Maryland, 5-3. They are on a 3-game losing streak since they lost to the Buckeyes. But this happens every year to Maryland. They have a 4-0, 5-0 start, then they just train wreck after that. But they have a pretty decent offense, so they can move the ball. But Penn State has a really good defense. Look for Drew Aller to get back on track. Look for Allen to have a good running physical game. So I have Penn State winning this one 32-10. So I have them covering. Could Maryland get more than 10 points possibly? But I think Penn State will come out violent, basically, leading up to that Michigan game. They want to look good. So look for Penn State to get the win here. Next game, a really tough game at 3:30 on ABC. We have number 10 Oklahoma at 7-1 versus 6-2 Oklahoma State, who should probably be ranked this week. But Oklahoma is 6-point favorites. This is a tough game. This is a rivalry game. This is an in-state rivalry game. And this is the last time that we could be seeing this game in quite some time because the Sooners are going to the SEC next year and they're not scheduled to play after this. So Oklahoma, coming off of that sloppy loss versus Kansas, looks like the defense has just completely disappeared the last few weeks. They had a close game versus UCF, and then they lost to Kansas. Hopefully that woke them up. They must get things back on track. They need to win out to get back to the Big 12 championship and see if they can beat Texas and get into the playoffs. But I could see Oklahoma losing one more game this year. That is very possible. They have looked very sloppy the last few weeks. Oklahoma State, they have a really good running game. Gordon has 1,100 yards at week 10. They will be keeping the ball on the ground, trying to control the clock. Sooners have absolutely no run game, so that will hurt them. But I could easily see this being an upset. I would stay away from this game personally. I would not be surprised if the Cowboys win. I think it's probably more favored that they actually beat the Sooners while they're down. But I am going to go with Oklahoma winning here, a close one, 31-27, and not covering that spread. But like I said, I would in no way be surprised if the Sooners lose this game. Next game at 3:30 p.m. on the ACC network, we have 4-4 Virginia Tech, who's having a pretty decent year so far this year, versus number 15 Louisville at 7-1. Louisville is 9.5-point favorites, coming off of that complete shutout of the Duke Blue Devils. So Louisville does have a top 25 defense. They have a top 30 offense. They have Plummer. They have Jordan. They have Thrash. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. Like I said, they are favored by 9.5 here. Virginia Tech should not be able to keep up with them technically on paper. So look for Louisville to get the win. I have them winning 30-21, just not covering the spread. And then at 3:30 p.m. on ESPNU, we have number 21 Tulane at 7-1 versus East Carolina at 1-7. So flip-flopped records there. Tulane 16.5-point favorites, pretty big spread here. So East Carolina, they have a god-awful offense. They have a pretty decent defense, though. Tulane has a good offense and a good defense. They have the far better playmakers. They have Pratt back, Hughes, Keys the third. Pratt, they would be undefeated potentially if he played the Ole Miss game because they barely lost that game. But look for them to cruise to the win here. They should be able to throw the ball and they should be able to run the ball. So Tulane will win 31-17. I just have them not covering that spread. Next game at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN2, we have number 23 James Madison 8-0 versus Georgia State at 6-2. James Madison 5.5-point favorites here. So James Madison having a pretty good year this year. Now Georgia State, they are actually not a bad team and they can run the ball pretty well with Carroll, who has almost 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. So look for them to try to keep the ball on the ground, try to control the pace of the game, try to control the clock. But look for James Madison to just have too much firepower, and I have them winning 30-27 in another close one and not covering that spread. Next game at 5:30 p.m. on the Pac-12 network. 3-5 Cal coming off of that really close shootout loss to the Trojans versus number 6 Oregon at 7-1. So Oregon, 24-point favorites here. Cal had that really close loss to USC. That will not happen versus the Ducks because the Ducks have a very good defense, a very physical defense. So they're going to shut that down. This is not an Alex Grinch defense. The Ducks, so they have Bo Nix, so they have a top 3 Heisman quarterback. They have Franklin. They have the running game. They have the passing game. Nix has only 1 pick, and I think they only have 1 fumble as a team. This is a very well-coached team. They do not mess up. Look for them to beat up and get physical with Cal. I have them cruising to a very easy win here, 45-20, and beating up Cal at the line of scrimmage and also covering that spread. The thing about Oregon is they need to win out and get that rematch with Washington. The whole season is still in front of them right now. They are number 6 just on the outside looking in. If they just win out, they will get in the playoffs. Next game we have at 7 p.m. on ESPN, another really good matchup. Number 22 Kansas coming off that win versus the Sooners at 6-2 versus Iowa State at 5-3. Iowa State is the favorite here, so the underdog is favored by 2.5 points here. Iowa State started out the year really sloppy, but they've been playing really good football the last few weeks, led by a really strong defense, only giving up 326 yards per game. Kansas does not have a good defense, but they have a really efficient offense. They can throw, but they definitely run the ball. Their goal is to keep the ball on the ground, and they are averaging 214 rushing yards per game and 230 passing yards per game. So like we said before, Iowa State is the favored team here. I would not be surprised if they win. This is a very close physical game that always favors Iowa State, and they always seem to get one upset win per year. That's the way it's always worked for Campbell. That's the way it always will work for Campbell. But I'm going to go with Kansas getting the win here, 27-24. But I would not be surprised if they lose also, because these late season close games always favor Iowa State for some reason. Next game we have at 7:30 on NBC, 2-6 Purdue with the worst defense in the Big Ten versus number 2 Michigan at 8-0. Michigan 32.5-point favorites. That's a massive spread for an in-conference game. Look for Michigan to get physical. they're really pissed off with all of the cheating talk. So they want to beat up these teams, shut them out, run the score up. JJ McCarthy having a great year, 18 touchdowns, 3 picks. They can definitely control the game on the ground. Corum, Edwards, they have the far better roster. It is not close. They want to go into the Penn State game cruising because they want to blow them out also. So look for Michigan to get an extremely easy win here. I have them winning 45-13. They won't cover that spread. That's a really big spread. But, I would not be surprised if they win like 50-3. So it can happen because they're angry right now. But they will be getting the win nonetheless. What's just really crazy is their defense only giving up 226.8 yards per game. A crazy tough defense, and they are out for blood right now. Next game we have at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. Number 5, Washington at 8-0 versus number 24, USC at 7-2. This is a reason to be watching games late at night here. This is one of the better matchups of this season quarterback-wise. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country, 1 the reigning Heisman winner. Washington, 3.5-point favorites. This game is going to be a shootout because USC's defense is complete garbage. They're trash. They gave up 49 points to Cal last week. They give up 35 points to everybody. So looking at the defenses, USC gives up 421 yards per game. Washington's not too much better. They are better, but not by much. They give up 400 yards per game. But the offenses, they score 501 yards per game, led by Penix and that great wide receiver core. And the Trojans get 482 yards by that offense, led by Caleb Williams, who will be the number 1 pick in the draft. This game is a game of playmakers. These teams are loaded. USC can run. They can throw. Washington has the best passing attack in the country. So this game can honestly go either way. I'm going to go with Washington winning 41-35, covering the spread because USC cannot tackle anybody to save their life. Odunze, they will not get that guy on the ground. I'm going to say he has 150, 160 yards this weekend. So I have Washington winning. But this is a close one. The Pac-12 is so deep that they can cannibalize themselves. But Washington, they have no run game. That's their biggest weakness. They have 0 run game and they have 0 defense. That's not going to help them if they get to the playoffs. But USC has a run game, but they have a god-awful defense. So I'm going with Washington winning here. But the game of the weekend is at 7:45 on CBS. Number 13 LSU at 6-2 versus number 8 Alabama at 7-1. Bama is 3-point favorites. This was a really close, fun game last year. With these teams, they're kind of going in different directions right now. So Bama's completely flipped the script this season. They have a pretty bad offense, but it's serviceable, and they don't make too many mistakes. They're only averaging 367 yards per game, and their defense is giving up 306. For LSU, 553 offensive yards per game, giving up 395 yards per game. So their defense is not good at all, but it's been playing better the last few weeks. So they've kind of gotten things on track since the Ole Miss loss. Bama playing pretty decent defense. Secondary is a little somewhat questionable, but Jaden Daniels, 2,600 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, 3 picks. He is having a Heisman level year. Technically is probably the favorite for the Heisman right now. This is going to be a tough game. Jalen Milroe might be forced to win the game through the air, on the ground. Can he step up? Can he do it? Look for LSU. They have playmakers everywhere. Daniels, Diggs, Neighbors. They can run. They can throw. They can't necessarily stop teams from scoring, but Alabama does not have a elite offense anyways. I'm going with the upset. So I called this to be an upset. Before the year started, I'm sticking with that. I'm going to go out on a limb there. I have LSU winning 28-24 and taking control of the SEC West. I would not be surprised if Bama wins, but I'm not very confident in their offense being able to win in a shootout versus the Tigers. So Brian Kelly gets back-to-back wins versus Saban here. Next game we have a late one, but a good one at 10 p.m. on ESPN. Number 16 Oregon State at 6-2 versus Colorado at 4-4. So The Beavers, they are going for back-to-back 10-win seasons. They are on their way to there. Last season of the Pac-12, they have no home next year. That's a complete shame, but they want to make a season of it and get to 10 wins. So, Sanders' team at 4-4. So, Oregon State 13-point favorites here. They have DJU. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. Colorado has a extremely good offense led by Shedeur Sanders. They have absolutely no defense. They did try to put up a fight last weekend versus the Bruins, but Sanders got beat up. He got sacked like 50 times, really sore after the game. They actually hurt him. So look for Colorado to again get beat up at the line of scrimmage here. Not as bad as the Bruins game, but Oregon State should control the line of scrimmage. Look for them to be able to run the ball. So being able to keep the ball out of Sanders' hands. I have Oregon State winning this one 30-28. So they won't cover that spread. They will win in a close shootout. Could Colorado rebound here, get the win? Yes, I would not be surprised if they get the upset win because, like I said, they have a really elite offense, but they can't stop anyone. So look for the Beavers to control time of possession here. The next matchup we have at 10:30 on Fox Sports, we have number 20 UCLA Bruins at 6-2 coming off of that win versus Colorado versus 5-3 Arizona. So the Bruins are 2.5-point favorites here. This is another potential upset. So the Bruins beat Colorado, but Arizona beat Oregon State. They have a very underrated offense. They played the Trojans really close. They played Washington really close. Do not underestimate Arizona. The Bruins, they have Dante Moore. He has not started the last few weeks. They have been going with Garbers, who is doing just as well. Very decent offense. They can run the ball. They can keep the game on the ground. But their main call to fame right now, surprisingly for Chip Kelly, is their defense. They have a really good defensive line. So look for them to get after Arizona's quarterback and bottle up the run game. I have the Bruins winning 24-20. So covering the spread. Do not underestimate Arizona, though. This is a very underrated team. Jed Fish has a really good team here. They could potentially win this game. I would not be surprised if they do. If they win, they need to be in the top 25 next week because their losses are really close losses versus ranked teams. So that's my breakdown of the AP Poll Top 25 games, my predictions for Week 10. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks.